president's remarks tonight from the Oval Office are the first time that he has addressed the nation from the Oval Office in prime time. Presidents tend to reserve addresses like that for various serious matters. He will be giving a State of the Union address later on this month. This was not that. But like a State of the Union, the Democrats asked for essentially rebuttal time. Democratic leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, the newly elected House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, standing side by side in a very serious tableau there, responding to the president, not point by point, but essentially trying to turn the focus from the president's claims that he needs a border wall to what he is holding hostage in order to try to get that, which is the shutdown of the federal government. Senator Schumer tonight closing by saying, our suggestion is a simple one, Mr. President, reopen the government and we can work to resolve our differences over border security. He said earlier in his remarks, there is an obvious solution, separate the shutdown from the arguments over border security. There is bipartisan legislation supported by Democrats and Republicans to reopen the government while allowing debate over border security to continue. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, echoing that same point, saying at the outset of her remarks, quote, the fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen the government and fund smart, effective border security solutions. So from the Democrats tonight, we're hearing, whatever you think about border security, Mr. President, we can fight about that. Let's reopen the government. Both Democrats and Republicans want that. You are the sticking point here, not leaders from either party. Nicolle Wallace and Chris Hayes are here with me on set. Nicolle, let me ask your response to that. It was, in some senses, typical partisan staging with the remarks from the president and then the response from the opposite party, but two very different sets of remarks.
Yeah, and listen, if you want to go to the politics of what they both said tonight, they were on the ballot 8 weeks ago. Donald Trump ran on that message in the midterms. He ran on the made-up caravan. It was almost the same play. He doesn't have a lot of them, so he reran it. It didn't work in the midterms. His party was thumped, lost control of the House. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's message tonight was actually stronger than what they ran on in the midterms, because now they can add, not only are you wrong, but you've also, like an 8-year-old, taken your toys and gone home by closing the entire federal government. So I think if in politics in Washington, especially now, it's all zero sum. So if it's a seesaw, who went up and who went down, the power, the political potency of their message tonight is on the uprise. Donald Trump has already grabbed as many people as he can grab with those admittedly tragic stories of horrific crimes.
Precise.
Yeah, I thought the sort of the difference in emphasis between the two is the most notable thing about the two addresses, right? Like, Donald Trump went out there and he read a Stephen Miller litany of horror stories, which he's been doing since day one.
In a nicer voice.
In a nicer voice, and I watched him do it in Cleveland, and it, beheadings and rape, and it's awful stuff to hear. There's genuinely horrific things that have happened, but to conflate them with the 12 million people living here is a kind of incitement that's pretty ugly. But we've heard that, like Nicolle said, that's been the deal.
It's a slightly different lists of crimes that evolves over time.
It updates. It gets updated.
It updates.
There are new crimes.
Right. Yeah. But it is this, Office of Immigrant Crime stuff that he has been trying to sell from the very beginning. And the fact is that, we've said it before, we'll say it again, native-born Americans commit crimes at a higher rate than non-native-born immigrants. And
all crimes, violent crimes, driving infractions, speeding, all crimes.
And it is a demagogic old saw to try to pick out horrific things that you're going to attribute to one minority group, particularly one powerless minority group, in order to try to turn the majority against them. And the president is singing that same song. But it really is exactly the same script.
But it's literally the same. I felt like I was in Cleveland. I remember watching that litany in Cleveland and being somewhat horrified and shocked that this was what was being delivered. And to Nicole's point as well about the point here, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a tweet about this a few days ago. She could be a guest later, basically saying, look, you want something, then come and craft a bill and go through the process like everything else.
Yeah.
Like, lots of people want lots of things from the government, and we have debates about it, and you work with the committee chairs, and maybe you can work something out, but this is not the way you do it.
And here's the deal. He doesn't have public support. What he had as a candidate was at the base of the Republicans supported that strain of fear-mongering about illegal immigration. If he had public support, he'd have a bill because members of Congress would support it. And I worked for a Republican president who addressed the nation over comprehensive immigration reform at the point where he had bipartisan support for it. President Obama should have been allowed to do the same thing in 2014, in my opinion. But this is a president with no bill. He doesn't even have all the Republicans on board.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have the public behind him. So it boggles the mind.
Well, with
that he
each
could fix
passing
that.
day, too, more Republicans peel off and say, let's get the government
Right.
restarted. The more government, and in fact, it should be noted, as those Republicans peel off, both in the Senate and in the House, they're lining up with what is now the official Democratic Party position, which is, we'll talk about this in some rational way if you want to, but we have to reopen the government.
Right.
The other thing is Cory Gardner, who is up in 2020 in the state of Colorado, which is increasingly a blue state, and who has made some noises about wanting to reopen the government. Cory Gardner will not be running for re-election in 2020 on the message that came from the Oval Office tonight.
No.
At 100%, he will get thumped if he tries, and he knows that. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.